NBA free agency is finally starting to wind down, with all of the big name free agents such as Kawhi Leonard, Kevin Durant, and Kyrie Irving already having decided where they'll be playing next. It's now that time of summer where teams around the league are simply looking to fill any holes they may have on their roster, with the majority of the remaining players out in the open market being third string options. However, while that is the case for a majority of the remaining free agents, it's not necessarily the case for all of the remaining free agents, as even though it's now in the middle of July, there are still a handful of players out there who, in the right situations, could prove to be very useful to some teams. Players who in their heyday would have been some of the cream of the crop free agents, players who were once revered as all-star caliber players, but are now viewed as either too old or washed up. Those are players that we're going to be taking a look at today and determining which team could be best suited for their talents. So without further ado, let's go. There was once a time when Dwight Howard was viewed as the best big man in the NBA, with scouts proclaiming him to be the second coming of Shaquille O'Neal well before his first official game. And these claims weren't without merit, as coming straight out of high school, physically, Dwight Howard already looked like he could dominate most bigs in the NBA at the time. Even though his body wasn't even fully developed, the strength and athleticism that Howard displayed while playing high school and AAU ball led very few to question that he deserved to be the number one overall pick of the 2004 NBA draft. And the fact that the Orlando Magic, the same team that drafted Shaquille O'Neal with the number one overall pick 12 years prior, was going to be the same team that drafted Dwight Howard, well, that only helps stem the comparisons between the two players even further, much to the dismay of Shaquille O'Neal himself. So once again, coming to the NBA straight out of high school, Dwight Howard had some pretty big expectations to live up to, and for the most part during his time with the Magic, Howard did live up to those expectations, or maybe even exceeded the expectation that some had for him. And that is despite the fact that Howard lost out in the Rookie of the Year race to Emeka Okafor, who was taken number 2 overall by the Charlotte Hornets. 8 All-Star selections, 3 Defensive Player of the Year awards, made the All-NBA team 6 times, the Eastern Conference champion, even won the Slam Dunk contest back in 2009 as well. During his time with the Magic, Dwight Howard seemed poised to become one of the greatest big men that the league has ever seen. Unfortunately though, we all know what came next, as just like Shaq did, Dwight Howard wound up leaving the Orlando Magic to team up with Kobe Bryant and the Los Angeles Lakers. However, instead of this move garnering multiple championships for Howard like it did for Shaq, instead his move to the Lakers more so marked the end of his time as one of the elite bigs in the league, as Howard somehow managed to have an even more toxic relationship with Kobe Bryant than Shaq did. And eventually this toxic relationship with Kobe, as well as the rest of LA, brought a very abrupt end to Howard's aim to be LA's next big man, as he was traded after just one very short season. And since his LA days, Dwight Howard has been an NBA journeyman, spending times with teams such as the Rockets, Hawks, Hornets, and most recently the Washington Wizards, each of which ending in similar fashions, with Howard being let go after failing to either coexist with the team's other stars or simply failing to produce at all. And now here we are, weeks into free agency, and even though he's only 33 years old, former NBA superstar Dwight Howard is still looking for a team to call home. Enter the Sacramento Kings. Last season, the Kings became one of the NBA's best stories. As for a franchise who struggled to find any type of success for more than a decade, all of a sudden you can start to see the light at the end of the tunnel for this young team. Led by players like De'Aaron Fox and Buddy Hield, Sacramento found themselves in contention for a playoff spot out west for a majority of the season, before eventually starting to slow down towards the end of the season and finishing with a record of 39-43, good for 9th place in the Western Conference. And even though they failed to log a winning record and make the playoffs, the year that the Kings just had could be seen as nothing but a massive turnaround compared to the season prior, when they only won 27 games. And now this season, with an even more experienced Fox and Hield, along with Marvin Bagley, Bogdan Bogdanovic, and Harrison Barnes, the Kings are poised to put up even more of a fight for a spot in the playoffs this year than they did last year. One thing they could be missing, however, is a center, as after letting their starting center for the past couple of years in Willie Cauley-Stein walk away to the Golden State Warriors for nothing, the center spot for Sacramento is pretty barren. Right now, 29-year-old NBA journeyman Dwayne Dedmon may be the best center on the roster. So with that being the case, if they can manage to land him for a good price, Dwight Howard could still be a great fit for the Kings if he can remain healthy. After all, the guy did just have a 30-30 game a couple of years ago. At 39 years old, Jamal Crawford became the oldest player in NBA history to score at least 50 points in a game this past season against Luka Doncic and the Dallas Mavericks when he scored 51 points. Unlike every other player I'll be mentioning today though, Jamal Crawford has never been selected to a single All-Star team despite being one of the best natural scorers that the league has had to offer during his time in the league. Back in the old days with the Knicks and the Warriors, Crawford could easily score at least 20 points on any given night. He's a player who, when he gets hot, there's no stopping him. He can single-handedly carry an offense for periods of a game. And of course, the only reason he's never been selected to an All-Star team is because he's like Lou Williams. He's just always accepted his role as a six-man and excelled at it, because like Lou Williams, Jamal Crawford is the only other player in NBA history to win the Sixth Man of the Year award 3 times, meaning the guy pretty much has All-Star merit to his name even without officially becoming an All-Star. And for the past couple of years, the NBA has had this trend of kind of disrespecting Crawford and his ability to still be a spark plug off the bench. Last season, after being passed up on by every contender and playoff team, Crawford was forced into signing a deal with the Phoenix Suns, averaging a modest 8 points per game during the 64 games that he came off the bench. And even though it's clear that he's been on the decline for a few years now, given the fact that he's approaching 40 years old, Crawford could still be a very valuable piece coming off the bench of a team with playoff aspirations, and one team that I think could use a bit of extra help coming off the bench for this upcoming season is the Golden State Warriors. This has been a massive offseason of change for Golden State, as not only did they lose Kevin Durant, but they also parted ways with a couple of key pieces who came off the bench for them during their championship runs in Andre Iguodala as well as Sean Livingston. And while they did add first-time All-Star D'Angelo Russell to their roster, Klay Thompson's expected to miss a majority, if not all, of the regular season after sustaining a torn ACL during the finals. So with that being the case, the team who once had all of the firepower in the world may find themselves in need of an extra scoring punch coming off their bench this upcoming season. And for Crawford, being able to share the backcourt at times with a player who forces defenses to do anything but double team and Stephen Curry would allow him to have a much easier time scoring the ball compared to when he was with the Phoenix Suns, where Devin Booker wasn't playing, which he wasn't for a large chunk of the season. He had little to no other players to draw the defense's attention away from himself. So recently, Chauncey Billups put Carmelo Anthony completely on blast, saying that during his time playing with Melo in Denver, that all Carmelo Anthony would care about is whether or not he scored 30 points, saying that even if the Nuggets won, unless Carmelo Anthony scored 30 plus, then he would sulk after games, and if the Nuggets lost and Carmelo had 30 plus points, then he'd be in a good mood in the locker room and trying to cheer up his teammates. And for Carmelo Anthony, this was pretty much the last thing that he needed to be said for his reputation, as fans have already been slandering his name ever since he failed to adapt in the slightest bit alongside Russell Westbrook and Paul George in Oklahoma City. And after failing to even crack the rotation after his first couple of weeks in Houston, playing alongside one of his best friends in the league and Chris Paul, the slander only grew worse. And then after it became clear that no team in the entire NBA wanted to touch Carmelo Anthony with 10-foot pole, the slander started to grow even worse. The player who fans once cheered for and gave the nickname Hoodie Melo to now found himself on the outside of the league looking in, hoping and praying that some team out there will be willing to give him a chance to show that he can still play with the best of them. And just keeping it frank with you guys right now, there still aren't many, if any, teams out there considering giving Melo a shot. Once again, after failing to adapt to a lesser role in OKC as well as Houston, why would teams think that anything would change if he joined their roster? If his best friend in the league in Chris Paul, as well as a former coach in Mike D'Antoni, couldn't get Melo to change, then who can? But here's the thing, if Melo does make a comeback to the NBA, it'll only be after he proves to someone out there that he cares about more than just getting his own numbers, as well as that he also cares about playing a bit of defense after all this time in the NBA. And if both of those things happen, then there just might be one team out there willing to give him a shot. And that team would be none other than the Brooklyn Nets. Now, it's well known that both Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant have a massive amount of respect for Carmelo Anthony, and the same can be said for Melo, as he has an enormous amount of respect for both Kyrie and KD. Add on to that, the Brooklyn is still a part of New York, the place Carmelo calls home, and him getting his last shot with the Nets is probably the best thing that he could ask for. And with Kevin Durant being entirely out for this season, this won't be a year that the Nets are looking to bring home their first ever championship. And with that being the case, they wouldn't have too much to lose by rolling the dice on Carmelo Anthony, as maybe being in the same environment as Kyrie and KD combined with playing the state of New York once again could prove to be the spark that Anthony needs to salvage what is left of his NBA career. Back during the summer of 2017, when it was announced that the San Antonio Spurs will be signing their 37-year-old Pau Gasol to a 3-year, $48 million contract, the entire NBA world balked. $16 million a season for a player who looked as if he could retire at any moment, it didn't make sense. And still to this day, it was one of the more perplexing contracts that the Spurs have handed out, as Gasol never even for a second lived up to the expectations that were placed upon a player that's earning $16 million a year. I mean, this was 2017, not 2010. This wasn't the Pau Gasol who was good enough to be the second best player behind Kobe Bryant on the Lakers when LA won back-to-back championships in 09 and 010. This wasn't even the Pau Gasol that signed with the Chicago Bulls during the summer of 2015. This was Pau Gasol well out of his prime, coming off a season in which he only averaged 12 points and 8 rebounds per game. He was still very much a serviceable player, and he would have made a heck of a backup center for every team in the league, but $16 million a year was outright preposterous. And as I mentioned, he never lived up to the contract. The Spurs eventually waiving Gasol last season, allowing him to sign with the Bucks, where he only played 3 games before having to sit out the remainder of the season after having surgery on his foot. And now at 39 years old, the former All-Star and Rookie of the Year is still looking for one more team to give him a shot. And fortunately for Gasol, there might be a couple of teams out there who are still looking to add a backup center to their roster. The main one being the Detroit Pistons. Even though they have Andre Drummond, one of the best rim runners and rebounders that the league has ever seen, the Pistons have had a hard time over the years finding a serviceable backup for Drummond, as they have tried their hands at numerous players ranging from Eric Moreland to Zaza Pachulia. Currently, however, the only center on Detroit's roster is Andre Drummond himself. And while a player like Thon Maker may be able to provide spot minutes at the center position, a full-fledged center who is really capable of guarding other centers in the league is still atop the Pistons' wish list. And that is a position that Pau Gasol could certainly fill, and what Gasol may lack in his ability due to age, he can make up for with his very high basketball IQ as well as his leadership presence in the locker room, as he is a player with tons of playoff and championship experience. And with the availability of quality backup bigs being so low at the moment, for the Pistons, Pau Gasol could be one of the safer options. Last but not least on this list, we have Vince Carter, who at a record-setting 43 years old is still holding out faith that he can land one more roster spot in his career. Now, Vince Carter is one of your most respected players in the league, not only amongst coaches and players, but also amongst the fans as well. I mean, here's a guy who, once again, 43 years old. No need to be playing in the NBA anymore whatsoever, and yet he still sticks around. And not only sticks around, but Vince Carter is still able to produce, except now instead of being the high-flying Vince who brought us some of the most iconic dunks the world's ever seen, he's evolved more into so of the typical 3-and-D type wing, as a guy that's hit nearly 40% of his shots from beyond the arc while averaging just under 8 points per game for the Hawks last season. And another reason that Vince is so respected though is because it seems he simply refuses to sign with the championship contenders solely for the sake of chasing a ring. He doesn't want to go down as one of those guys who in his last seasons in the league gave up actually playing in exchange for riding the end of a bench with hopes that the team that they were on wins it all. And instead, Carter signs with teams like Sacramento and Atlanta, who have tons of young talent that he can help mentor in the locker room while at the same time being able to produce on the floor. And that is why for the final season of his career, if he still refuses to chase a ring, I would like to see Vince Carter sign with the Utah Jazz. They might not be as young of a team as a team like the Atlanta Hawks or the Sacramento Kings, but he could still be a useful mentor for third-year guard Donovan Mitchell as he ascends into stardom, as well as the Jazz could use the outside shooting that he provides, and being able to hopefully still play meaningful minutes on a playoff team while mentoring one of the young up-and-coming stars in this league seems like a good way for Vince to put the final stamp on his legendary career. That's it though. Those are 5 former NBA stars who are still looking for a team, as well as teams that I think could use their services. As always with these types of videos, they're purely subjective and up for personal opinion. You guys might think that they should end up somewhere else, and that's fine. But with that being the case, I want you to let me know where you would like to see these players end up down in the comment section below. With all of that being said though, hope you guys enjoyed the video. Make sure that you subscribe to the channel with post notifications on so you don't miss out on more banger videos that I'll be dropping soon. But until next time, keep getting the buckets, Team SDC, and I'm out of here. Peace!